Joined in our studios by four distinguished guests. Please welcome Sanjay Kaul, spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Welcome to Insight, Mr. Kaul. Sitting next to him is Dr. Monica Chansoria. She's a senior fellow with the Center for Land Warfare Studies. Welcome to Insight, Dr. Chansoria. Sitting next to her is S. Venkat Narayan, senior journalist. Welcome to the show, Mr. Narayan. And we're also joined by Dr. Shamshad Khan. He's a research fellow with the ICWA, that's the Indian Council of World Affairs. Welcome to the show, Dr. Khan. Mr. Kaul, I'd like to begin with you. How do you view the Prime Minister's visit to South Korea from look east to now act east?
Well, of course, if you were to look at just South Korea, it has it's indicative of a much larger, let's say, plan. And to that extent, I think it has to be seen in that larger perspective. But specifically also, I think South Korea has become also part of the idea that, you know, the economic theater is shifting to Asia. And so the natural progression of that idea would be that we have to start focusing on these areas and not over-invest in the economies which are no longer in the sort of in prime of health to that extent. That is part of the reason I think this look east has become act east. Also, don't forget that South Korea has been a sterling example of manufacturing prowess and you know, a tiger economy which has been able, small country has been able to actually become a powerhouse of manufacturing for globally. Also, don't forget that South Korea had the advantage of actually started working with us. Their brands, their companies are well known, even when other, let's say, countries had difficulties in sort of adjusting to the climate, so to say, working climate of India. And so this is this I think is something that will probably kickstart the very focused attempt at trying to become a manufacturing magnet for not just Asia and the world, as I think as Prime Minister has pretty clearly stated many times. Also, I think from a geostrategic point of view, it helps us to start building pockets of influence among the countries that have, for instance, commonalities or traditional basis for relationships or cultural linkages.
Right.
Don't also forget that South Korea is a democracy in an environment which is not that liberal. So I think, without stating too much on that, I think I'd like to imagine that too is part of the larger plan that we are moving into. From that point of view, I think this is a cog. But in the larger game, this is a very important step.
All right. Dr. Chansoria, before we talk about the various agreements that have been signed and get into the details, if you could give our viewers a little perspective of our relationship with South Korea, how our relations have evolved. The two countries have a lot in common. We are both vibrant democracies, and as Mr. Kaul rightly pointed out, we've had historical and cultural linkages with them.
I'll take off from where the previous speaker left on economic theatre shifting to this part of the world. India and South Korea have had a very deep bilateral relationship, and what really stands out with Prime Minister Modi's visit is that this relationship has now been elevated to a special strategic relationship. I would try to extrapolate this in the reference of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy endeavors and initiatives which have sort of reinvigorated India's foreign policy per se. Beginning with what I've often argued in my writings, the first year was consolidating India's immediate neighborhood, and his spate of visits to our neighboring countries has been a manifestation of that, and now he's reaching out to the second tier with Japan and South Korea now. Incidentally, it's very important to note that this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi very specifically has spoken, and an agreement has been signed between the two countries to initiate a 2+2 dialogue between the foreign ministers and the defense ministers. Now, what is important is that South Korea is only the second country after Japan with which we have signed such an agreement. So the basic point that I would like to submit would be that India values its relationship with South Korea, primarily based, as you very correctly stated, on the fundamentals of democracy, and thereafter enhance it on an economic foundation, on a geostrategic foundation, and the mutual interests areas of cooperation which will be an important pivot in defining the future of India's involvement with East Asia per se.
Mr. Narayan, how do you view the Prime Minister's visit? Clearly fits in with his larger scheme of things, the Prime Minister's pet projects such as Make in India and so on, kind of an extension of his economic agenda.
Yeah, if Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister who initiated the Act East policy, Look East actually, so you would have been the happiest man today, because Mr. Modi has taken it to the next level by acting East. And we have an excellent relationship with Korea. An average Indian, as the PM said yesterday in Seoul, uses many things made in Korea, like the telephone, washing machine, refrigerators, television, you name it, and it's absolutely wonderful that he has set up Korea Plus after Japan, and then you have there's going to be an expansion of relations in defense and navy and things like that, and also this $10 billion investment the Koreans have promised. It is going to be invested in high-tech areas, and Park Geun-hye, the president of Korea, has said that India and Korea together, they can really make a lot of things happen. And I think it's excellent, because after China, Mongolia, the PM goes to South Korea, a nation tiger, with one of the highest incomes per capita, and a country of 5 crores or 50 million people, with 1.5 trillion GDP and more than $28,000 per capita. So it's wonderful that we are trying to enhance our relationship with a country like Korea.
Dr. Khan, we have tried to, in fact the two countries have announced that we are upgrading our relationship now to the level of a special strategic partnership. What is that all about?
Basically, there is a background to it. When India signed, we had signed a similar strategic partnership with Japan as well as Korea, and Russia we had. So we started upgrading the relationship with Russia. We gave the name strategic and special and strategic partnership with Russia. Then when it came to Japan, it was a special partnership, a special strategic partnership. And at that time, the Korean circle viewed that we are giving much more priority to Japan, and they are left out. Though they were the one who, without any objection, gave us they signed a nuclear cooperation agreement at a time when we were still in a negotiation phase. And then they had signed comprehensive economic partnership agreement with us, though Japan took longer time. Now, so there was a sense of rejection from their part.
Okay.
So India has tried to assuage their concern by giving the similar status, and as a previous speaker was saying, that we have given Korea Plus, and as well as we have elevated, we have started a strategic partnership, a strategic dialogue at the Vice Ministerial level, Indian Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry and their counterpart. One more important point which I want to elaborate or emphasize here is that for the first time, Korea's IFANS, which is a counterpart to Indian Council of World Affairs, during this visit, they have both the counterparts have agreed to upgrade their strategic thinking or their strategic dialogue to 1.5 level. Earlier it was at track 2 level. Okay. So what does it mean? That from their side and from our side, some of the serving bureaucrats in Indian Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry and the strategic thinkers would take enter into dialogue to understand their vision about the security of this region and beyond. Okay. So that is a development.
Okay. Mr. Kaul, talking about Japan and also China now, do you think our relationship with Japan, or for that matter even China, and how this geopolitical rivalry between the US and China in the region has somewhat clouded the narrative of India-Korea relationship, India-South Korea relationship?
No, I won't use the word clouded. on the other hand, I'd say that, in world affairs, circumstances and events actually provide engines for momentum in different areas. So, as you know, none of it works concurrently, but situations emerge, circumstances force you to sometimes, let us say, draw up, engagements which are normally not possible, or you would not have visualized them. So, I without trying to make that a specific point, I'd say that every country has the duty, I would argue, to establish relationships with other companies for mutual benefit. Number one, with that principle in mind, I think, and with the idea of Mr. Narendra Modi and this government ever since it's come to power, that we have to expand our footprint, our influence. We have to build a manufacturing base. We have to start dealing with people, with countries we have not been dealing with. We have to also optimize these relationships wherever they exist. If you see all that in parallel, you would see that, while there may be arguments about the geostrategic nature of being a little more paramount, or that the paranoia of, let's say, the China at this point in time is probably forcing people to come together. But I think I don't think this government is interested in or intending to have the scene through that prism. The idea is still that it is a holistic foreign policy, economic policy plan, which does not mean that a good relationship with one neighbor has to be at the cost of another neighbor.
Okay, Dr. Chansori, would you like to come in on that one?
I think, I was about to say that actually. I'll add to what he said. In international politics, national interest ultimately becomes the pivot on which your entire orientation in terms of policy, programming and implementation hinges upon. And from that point of view, you find there are certain nation states which share similar ideals with you, and democracy, as we have been discussing, is one of the greatest fundamental pillars of that. So based on that, yes, India's relationship with South Korea is very special. At the same time, India's relationship with the United States is extremely important, because as Prime Minister has also stated, that we are natural allies and natural partners, because the given fundamentals are pretty much the same. On the other hand, even if I extend it to the country which Prime Minister Modi visited before South Korea, Mongolia, there has been a reference continuously by the Mongolian counterparts and Prime Minister Modi about India being an extended neighbor and a third neighbor, given that Mongolia's situation is such. It is perhaps, if I'm not wrong, it is the second largest landlocked country in the world after Kazakhstan. So given that situation placed between Russia and China, it's looking towards India as well. And again, democracy is a very big, Prime Minister Modi also mentioned about democratic credentials and how it is turning out to be a vibrant democracy. So I think national interest is extremely important, looking at it from a realpolitik prism. These are certain fundamental facets where a relationship, a particular country, does not necessarily have to get referenced in a third particular angle every single time. There is an odd exception here or there, but not every time.
All right. Well, with that, we slip into a short. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking about the Prime Minister's visit to South Korea. Okay, Mr. Kaul, I'll continue with you. You wanted to make a point on how...
I thought I completely agree with what she said. I just wanted to add that, in foreign policy, particularly also in terms of advancement of relationship, you move where you can. It's not always because it takes two to tango. So when you are in a position to move forward with regard to any, let's say, country or any relationship, you do that. So it's not necessarily waiting for, a consonant movement somewhere else. So I think that this has to be sort of seen not in the context of any particular fear psychosis that's pushing us closer to anything. It has to be seen, particularly at this point in time, it has to be seen in the context of Indian interests being pushed forward by this government. And in many ways, there's something called the ease of doing business in economic parlance. But to that extent, politically also, when nations start doing business with each other, that's also dependent on both partners agreeing.
Okay. All right, Dr. Khan, I believe you also had something to say.
It is quite natural to infer this kind of understanding that our effort to reach to Mongolia and South Korea after China's visit is to kind of balancing our relationship with China, or strategic balancing. But if you in the foreign policy, what happens? Sometimes we have to look from their perspective also. If you look at Mongolia, when our President Pratyabha Singh Patil visited that country, they were interested to sell their mineral resources to India, because at that time here demand of resources was growing, and they are one of the countries in the region which have abundance minerals which they want to sell. Basically, they have not been able to tap those resources, and they want other powers. Of course, they are landlocked, and they have developed a third neighborhood approach apart from Russia and China. Now coming to South Korea, you have to see South Korea has developed an excellent relationship with both China, if you look at from the economic and trade perspective, and US, if you look at from the purely strategic and military perspective. And during our visit last year to IFANS, with which we have signed track 2, and now it has been elevated to 1.5 during Prime Minister's visit to South Korea. What we found and what we concluded, that they want to maintain equidistance between US and China, because at this moment their relationship, they want a beneficial relationship with both. And as regards India, they know that they have coined a term, that second China. That means they have huge surplus in their favor when they trade with China. They are the only one country. Now they are looking at India to expand those economic and trade bases.
Okay, so but I believe there are some concerns on the Indian side as well. We have the CEPA with them, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with them, but there were calls from South Korea for a revision in this agreement, and there are concerns from our side as well. We need greater access to South Korean markets.
You are right. This has started 2 years back. In CEPA, when we signed CEPA, there are provisions that we can revisit the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement twice, 2 times. Now, the aim of that Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement was to forge a balanced bilateral trade ties. Now, after reaching to a peak, it has reached to a standstill. Initially, it jumped from $6 billion to gradually to $18 billion, but it has hit to a saturation point. Now both the countries are looking. Now we have signed various FTAs with other countries, and they have also signed FTAs with other countries. Now they are trying to look at our agreement, and we are trying to look at their agreement, that what kind of preferential treatment they have given to other countries. So we are trying to rebalance the economic partnership agreement to further elevate it, further upgrade it.
Okay, Mr. Narayan, how do you view our economic relationship? The government has a plan in place, the Prime Minister's Make in India project, and he plans to transform India into a major manufacturing hub, and South Korea, of course, as the Prime Minister also said, there can be no better partner for us to take forward the Make in India initiative.
He is absolutely correct, because Korea, a country of just 5 crores of people, and it grew at the rate of more than 10% for 32 years continuously up to 1994. And it's one of the biggest exporters and one of the biggest importers also. And of course the United States and China are its major business partners. And after CEPA was signed, our trade went up, but it is going down at the moment. So the revision of CEPA and the offer of the South Korean president to invest $10 billion in India, and the fantastic success of South Korean products in India, like the telephones and cars and so on, suggests that a collaboration between India and Korea will make Mr. Modi's most ambitious plan of Make in India a grand success. So we can only go forward. And he's talking about unity, all the Asian countries working together. In his banquet speeches, speeches to students in China, Mongolia, Korea, he has been saying the success of one Asian country should be used by other Asian countries to take Asia forward, because everybody says 21st century belongs to Asia, and that will happen only if China, Japan, India and Korea work together along with other countries. So I think it's a very auspicious moment in our history that you have a person like Modi, who is very clear-headed about where he wants to take India. You know, this is excellent. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add to this, the other reason that South Korea is special in many ways for us is because this is one country which actually created what I call the absorption capacity. You know, there are so many countries in the world who could have exported stuff to us, and who could have built markets here, but none of them were successful. So in that sense, their entrepreneurial energies or abilities in a market like India work twofolds. One is that they elevated manufacturing capacity, our own capacities here, using their own brands and manufacturing capacity facilities, but they also built up a market for their product. So they did something enormously huge. It was a quantum leap for us in terms of product values, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of variety, in terms of competition, in terms of pricing. So they have actually, in a strange way, been a small little experiment that proved to the world that India could be both a manufacturing hub and a market and an export possibility. Hyundai exports today from here. And the other reason that we believe that this relationship is bound to succeed is because India could be a fantastic platform for South Korea to use to expand westwards in terms of their export obligations or interests.
All right, but you know, there are many who would say that South Korea has also made far less investments in India than compared to, you know, other Asian countries. Again, I am mentioning China and Japan.
Yes, but like I said, if you take it proportionately, number one. Number two, also in terms of penetration, please understand that you can invest as much as you want. But today, the brands that Korea produce are brands that are in villages today. Now, who has that sort of penetration? And in fact, it goes to the credit that with such little investment, if you can have this penetration, it tells you what can be possible.
Right. Well, we have to take yet another break in the program. We'll continue the discussion on the other. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to South Korea. Dr. Shamshad Khan, I'll continue with you. You wanted to say something?
Yes, as Mr. Kaul was saying, that Koreans were the first who tapped our market. Middle income families benefited from their investments here, their products here. Prior to that, other companies like Japanese companies were here on the market, but they were producing the products which which was being used by the high income families, not middle income families. So their manufacturing here made an impact, and the middle income families, they also benefited. Their way of lifestyle improved a bit. Now what happened after this Korean experiment? Other countries, including India and China, including Japan and China, they are also looking at the Korean way of investment and their production.
And the way they have captured our market.
So there is competition between the three.
All right.
Credit goes to South Korea for that.
Okay, Mr. Narayan, you wanted to come?
Yeah, you know, you now have 641 Korean companies doing business in India. Even though they have invested only $3 billion, whereas 40% of the investments are in the United States.
Right.
You know, the total investment is more than 300 billion global investment. Barely 1% have invested here, but look at, there is no village in this country, as the Prime Minister was saying yesterday, where people don't know of goods made in Korea. You know, like the Samsung. They're giving Apple a run for the money, you know. So this is fantastic. So we have they had the first advantage of coming here, and when the Japanese and Chinese were sleeping, they got into an area where
right, Mr. Ryan, so you are saying South Korean giants are household names in India. We'd like to tell our viewers that you can see visuals from South Korea coming straight to us live from South Korea. The Prime Minister is on a 2-day visit to that country there. Dr. Chinsoria, what would you like to say about, the $10 billion loan that South Korea is going to grant us for our infrastructure projects, for development of smart cities, railways? Many of them are the Prime Minister's pet projects.
I think it's a very, very welcome announcement, and infrastructure build-up is extremely important, not just from a mere economic point of view, which is just very obvious, but I think in the larger geostrategic sense also infrastructure build-up is extremely important as India acts east by Prime Minister's new initiative. If you note, when he visited Myanmar and inaugurated at his inaugural address at the ASEAN summit, he mentioned very clearly how India needs to now start acting east, move with infrastructure projects, and our northeastern region becomes the gateway to Myanmar and further towards Southeast Asia and East Asia per se, and South Korea figures very importantly. Right. So we would welcome greater South Korean involvement in building infrastructure, especially in regions in the Northeast India which require an infrastructure boost to facilitate greater trade and investment and bring about prosperity in that part of the country per se.
Right. Mr. Kaul, $10 billion by way of soft loans for many of the Prime Minister's key schemes, including smart cities. The government has also unveiled a plan to set up 100 smart cities across the country. How is this going to help?
Yeah, no, of course it's going to help in the sense that any infusion of this sort, particularly and hopefully with the technological backup, is going to elevate, it's going to speed up, and it's going to help and assist in carving out this, let's say, this dream that we are talking about. But also remember that, South Koreans have a terrific facility in, for instance, shipbuilding.
Right.
We have, I'm sure that there is a huge amount of improvement possible with our capacities in the same field. That is something that's going to be, I'm thinking that's going to be a very crucial area of cooperation. Right. So I think more than just the idea of their investments in terms of the 10 billion that you're talking about, the relationship, if it permeates into more strategic areas like shipbuilding or the other, let's say, strategic areas that we would like them to invest in, is going to have far-reaching impact, and that is where South Korean commitment to India shows, and in fact to that extent, not just commitment, also stamina. Like I said earlier, that companies which were intending to imagine India as a market would come in, face difficulties, go back, cite examples of how difficult to do business here. But this is a country which was committed to it. Its companies exhibited the stamina to continue, and they delivered. And for that matter, they created a template for everybody else to sort of look at as a possibility. Right,
but this brings me to the issue of POSCO. Mr. Kaul, it was for us the biggest FDI project. It has run into rough weather. It's stuck because of a variety of reasons. Do you think that's somewhere going to impact? Of course, the Prime Minister is working on changing that perception about India and how, the ease of doing business that you talked about.
To that extent, yes. I mean, there have been, and we know that we are coming out of literally a 4-year sort of comatose economy, and which has not really done much for our image. So you do understand that in that context, Mr. Modi's attempts at trying to go out to these countries and make and repair the image or to rebrand ourselves is central to the idea of bringing people in. Nobody's going to do business with you until they have faith in what your systems are. So you need to create that. At the same time, and then you need to create the circumstances, the environment in which they can probably perform. So South Korea becomes a first-rate example that in spite of POSCO, in spite of such difficulties, like I stated, that these companies have persisted. South Korean companies have not cited this as an example of failure. They have moved forward where they can, and they have exhibited incredible entrepreneurship. And India has responded equally well, and I think that is what we are cementing now.
Right. Dr. Chinsoria, wanted to add something?
I'll just add to that and say that it requires a great deal of perseverance and maneuvering to move on to and create an atmosphere in the immediate neighborhood and beyond, globally as well, to move away from a certain a distinct sense of sort of slight inertia which was earlier, and now sort of reinvigorate it in terms of attracting greater investments, attracting greater trade and investment, foreign policy initiatives. And for that, Prime Minister Modi's initiative of making these trips and going and visiting these countries and sort of portraying an image and a sincerity sort of an approach to attract greater understanding on issues is a welcome move.
Right, Mr. Kaul.
This also comes from the implicit belief of the Modi government that manufacturing is going to be the solution for our problems. That we have moved and we will, because the deficits that we have in terms of education delivery, in terms of skill management, in terms of all of those things, that we are not going to be able to move the needle very fast unless and until we start. And I think that clarity, and for a lot of people who criticize or who have been, who've tended to basically use his foreign visits as some sort of a taunt, I have to say that that's the most immature statement anybody could make if he's the interest of the country as at heart, because we have not done this exercise for the last 20 years, and that deficit is being made up now. So there is the outward, let us say, outreach, and there is the inward preparation. Okay. Like I said, you can have all the technology in the world, but if you cannot absorb it, it's wasted. Right. It's like a body; if it cannot absorb a certain sort of transfusion, it will reject it. So you have to manage both. You have to go out, outsource, sell yourself, and you have to create conditions by which whatever is received is retained.
Right, Mr. Rani?
Yeah, I want to make a basic point. It's wonderful that the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans, they are coming forward to invest billions of dollars in India. And we must be aware of the fact that we should not be creating just 100 islands of prosperity in the name of smart cities, while the rest of India, look at the state of roads. You go anywhere in North India, Northeast India, they are a massive, they are in a mess. So ideally we should also be thinking of connecting all the villages and cities of India with an excellent road network. When you produce something, it has to reach its destination.
Right.
It's a bullock cart and a Concorde plane should not coexist. That's what is happening here, and I hope that we will do something about improving infrastructure in more than 6 lakhs of villages and hundreds of towns across India. That's very important.
Just to clarify, that smart cities are not an exercise in exclusion, but an experiment in manifestation. These are basically hubs that bring or attract the quality of life that you are not going to be able to deliver unless or until these little clusters are made. You understand that all development has the only problem development has is delivery, and delivery means distance, it means time, it means getting there, and those are being attempted to actually be resolved by creating these little hubs, which will in fact, rather than in a linear fashion, to actually create these small magnetic points, which basically bring all these things together.
Dr. Chinsoria?
I guess there is a very ardent requirement to sort of merge both what Mr. Kaul and Mr. Narayan said, that at one hand building up of smart cities, this entire program per se, and at the other level, the very basic infrastructure, especially in the far-flung areas.
Right.
So at some point, there has to be some mechanism by which both these can be merged together. So at the end, there is not a very clear disparity between what is urban India and what is rural India, where it is difficult to cross a 10-kilometer road in a few minutes. That becomes an ordeal. And having traveled across Northeast India, especially in the border areas, I know what I'm saying, because it's extremely difficult to travel, especially on a given rainy day. The infrastructure build-up is in a pathetic state. It needs to be notched up.
Dr. Khan, coming back to the business relationship between India and South Korea, we are going through a transformation, as your co-panelists also have pointed out. The government is trying to make doing business easier. They are trying to bring in economic reforms. The whole country is being turned into a single market by bringing in the GST. We are looking at liberalization of foreign investment norms as well. How is all of this going to cement our relationship with South Korea, the economic relationship?
As Mr. Kaul has pointed out previously, that the Koreans were the ones who invested in our market, despite having facing difficulties in infrastructure and other areas. Now, once we have given them equal opportunity, we have given them the Korea Plus cell to expedite the trade ties as well as the commerce relationship. And then apart from that, we have one point which we have missed so far, is that for the first time there was a CEO forum of India and Korea that has taken place, and they are going to institutionalize it. So this kind of mechanism where business to business relationship is not only between the government but with the entrepreneurs that are working in this field will certainly boost the trade and economic ties as well as investment and manufacturing in India.
But there's also a lot of potential that is still waiting to be tapped. We understand South Korea's worldwide investment is close to $300 billion.
Well, of course, once we give them a bigger platter, and as GST is coming to force, and they also look to various development that has taken place in India, and they would try to capitalize.
Right, Dr. Khan, I have to interrupt you here. We'd like to tell our viewers that you can watch the Prime Minister's speech is right now speaking in South Korea. That's coming to you live from South Korea. Well, we shall bring you excerpts of that speech in just a moment. Right, Dr. Khan, you were talking about this scope that is there in the
yeah, as I was saying that when we are going to introduce GST and when we are going to liberalize our market, and they have been there, they have been working in this market, and they study what kind of development that is taking place. So certainly they will tap those potential and those changes that is taking place in India, and our trade and investment as well as manufacturing ties would go further.
Dr. Chinsoria, a point that was touched upon by Mr. Kaul, but we couldn't discuss it further. It was on shipbuilding. In the area of shipbuilding, the South Koreans have a lot of expertise in that area. Strategically speaking, how significant is that? We have set up a working group, we understand, in that area.
Yes, that is a very crucial sector from an Indian standpoint, especially from a strategic